Hey everybody, welcome to Each Channel News. We've got Danny Brickman. He's a co-founder and CEO of Oasis Security, and we're going to dig into what they do. It's a bit of a startup, but I believe they've got some really interesting things in the cyber world. Danny, welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me here.
That's my
Good day
pleasure.
here in New York.
Well, cybersecurity is one of those things, it's a hard nut to crack, and a lot of folks are trying to, move the needle forward. But let's get your take. What is it exactly that Oasis Security do?
Oasis Security is focusing on the emerging problem of non-human identities, though it's a new term that is right now being established in the market, but it's not a new problem that we have. Non-human identities are actually the fundamental authentication methods that machine to machine are using, right? So as we were transitioning, I would say in the last 20 years towards like more automation, more cloud, now we're a lot of chat around AI. All of those elements that are replacing manual work with automations are actually basing themselves on a different authentication method. So, for example, you as a human, you could use username and password, right? Machines are using different authentication methods that along the year just expanded, and now we're actually experiencing a boom of non-human identities. And like the reasons that are given, right? Like the cloud, the AI, everything is just like driving more and more to the point that we're actually seeing 50 times more non-human identities than human identities.
And
So
this is a bit like the those bots, right? It's similar but not quite the same, right? Can you explain the difference first of all between the bot agents and a non-human inter identity?
So in many ways, the difference lays in the architecture that has changed. And without getting into like too much nitty-gritty technology out there, when you as a human want to do a process, right? You have your account, going somewhere, you're pulling out some data, you're like writing it down, calculating something, pushing it into a different place, right? Using a single account. But reality is that in the world of machines, this process is done automatically. But each and every one of those interactions, it's a non-human interaction, right?
Hmm.
Non-human authentication. So those bots that are replacing your manual work, right, right now are actually leveraging the ecosystem of a lot of authentications. And this kind of shift in the market right now, it's like people are like, wait a second, we have something new, we have something different, like it's big. And not to point that like actually, personally I've been a hacker for like many years and I know how what it is to leverage like vulnerabilities in an account, though like not legal, a legal hacker, but like this is kind of like the points when like statistic game is playing, right? When you have 50 times more, probably the problem is much bigger, and it's actually is.
Interesting. So paint me the picture of a situation if you don't have these NHIs under control. What could happen? What could a hacker, a bad actor, do?
Let me just give you a live example from one of the breaches last year, right? A few developers were playing around and like trying to establish an access to database. And they were sharing the secret, the password, let's put it that way, between them in an open channel. Next thing happened is that the attackers were actually on that channel. They found this password and they just used it directly to access to the database, reading 38 terabytes of data, personal information, like sensitive information of customers of those accounts. So, and it was so simple. If you think about it, it didn't require a lot of effort, right? So this is a practical way of us not controlling, not thinking even in a secure manner with those accounts.
Interesting. I mean, look, in simple terms, like in a phone, right? You're talking to someone and say, "Hey,
Yeah,
my password is 1 2 3 4 5," and then all of a sudden, anybody with a listening device can hear your password. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but I guess it's a similar type of analogy, right?
exactly. 100%.
So
The best.
how do we protect ourselves with this?
So first of all, the biggest problem right now is that we're already after the boom. We're not before the boom. So we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know how much we have. And all of the organizations we're working with, the first step they're doing is actually discovering the problem, right? Understanding like how big is the problem, where is the biggest risk, and contextualizing that. So the first step we're doing is discovering and contextualizing that to explain what was this key used for, what is this password used for, right? Like
Hmm.
establishing the understanding of what is the problem, right? Which is like usually in many cases in life, right? Like understanding the problem is 90% of solving the problem, right?
Yeah.
But next steps is also how do we remediate and like how do we manage that and put it in controls. And this is a lot of processes that we are building with customers today according to their policies. So we want to be like helping a help from the side that is covering the pieces that they cannot do by themselves.
When you do a discovery, right, Danny, and how crazy is it that you see? How many? Is there a number like somebody you got a million NHIs open? Is there a quantitative number that you see that is unprotected, just not being managed?
So first of all, the number is like lying between 10 to 100 times more than the human accounts they have, which is
Okay.
always eye-opening to everyone. Like, how the hell I have like 80,000 in one specific infrastructure and NHIs, right? Like, how comes? And first of all, they need to understand that they're understanding it pretty quickly because we're mapping down like, oh, like you have those third parties that you're integrated with, right?
Mhm.
Those are using non-human identities. You have those bot and AI agents that you just deployed last year. They're using thousands of those accounts to access the systems. The moment you understand the story, they understand that like how big is this problem, and then always there's like a surprising like account that like being given to an unverified contractor that like no longer working with us with like huge privileges, while we are like focusing on things that are like pretty protected. You have like a guy here that is like no contractual obligation to you, can just like access your system.
Interesting. When I visualize cybersecurity, I use a house analogy, with houses and windows not being open and whatever, but I also look at it as a simple chain. And we've got this chain made of, steel, but then there's one of these links that's made out of paper. And we missed it because we were only looking for steel. And it seems like it's another link, another thing in the chain of security postures that maybe even CISOs are overlooking. Do you think that people are looking for this right now?
From what we're seeing right now in the market, most of the companies are actually focusing on that, on solving that problem. And I loved your analogy around the house because this is the analogy that I'm using with our NHIs, right? So let's assume that you had a key to your house, but I will tell you that also this key will be replicated regularly and everyone can use it. And like 100 people have that key in their hand. Would you put your most valuable things in your house?
I have a
Right?
different house. Yeah, but yeah,
Exactly,
interesting.
exactly. And it's actually what's happening, right? Like you cannot any longer trust because you don't know who is responsible for that. Like the most basic question that I'm asking is like, would you share your personal password for your Gmail to anyone?
Mm.
The answer probably will be like, well, only like if it's my wife or like my family that I trust wholeheartedly. But sharing like an access to database with a lot of sensitive data with your buddy to help you configure something, right?
I wouldn't even trust my friends with that.
Yeah.
They would publish it. Anyways, um, so so you've got this challenge, right? And how people are solving it. Obviously, your solution helps them to understand the scope, right, of this
Yeah.
problem. So now, you spin up the Oasis Security, and it kind of shows you, uh-oh, you've got this problem, right?
Yeah.
And then you look a little closely at it, and you could say, wow, this is a pretty bad problem. You kind of like prioritize it. When you get to that point, how do you mediate it?
So there's different ways, but I like it's just like every child needs to be treated in a different way, right? And
Mm.
so I would say like every different non-human identity needs to be treated in a different way, but under the same umbrella of policies, right? So first of all, what we're doing is we're establishing an understanding with the CISOs, with the security teams of what they want to achieve, what is important for them, like what are their policies. So I'll give you an example. If the policy of the organization is rotation of privileged accounts every 90 days, right? It's something that is happening, it's like obligations, etc. How do, first of all, as we discovered everything, how do we make sure we do that in a way that from one hand, not disturbing the business, because
Mhm.
everyone is afraid that like if I'm just like doing something wrong, the production will be down, or this service will not be down, or this bot that we just established that is super critical will be down, right? So how do we make processes that are safe? And this is one of the things we're doing. We're helping them to do it in a safe way, streamlining a lot of the processes, embedding ourselves to their own processes that they're doing to make sure that we're actually getting to the point that we are remediating that. But also we help in a different ways of like cleaning up accounts, putting up usage of existing infrastructure tools that they have in order to achieve that. And we're big believers that security and development and infrastructure teams should work together, right? And it's not a matter of enforcing, it's a matter of working together. And if I may add one more thing, is that I personally don't think security is a tool. Security it's a philosophy. Security it's a mindset, right? And the more we're pushing toward that to establish this mindset in the existing processes, the better success we will have with remediation.
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. In the military world, I mean, the Navy SEALs and those people, right? They go into the situation looking for potential problems, and it's this heightened awareness, right? That keeps them on guard, that anticipates all the millions of things that could go wrong, and then to know how to deal with it. It's certainly a mindset for sure. When you when you discover the challenge, right, and you're implementing this, what's involved? Like how much work is involved from, your side, the channel partner side, to kind of like fix this problem?
So to light up the Christmas tree, as we love to say that, right? It's probably the simplest process can be done, right? Like we're narrowing down to just like funny, we're requiring a non-human identity, right, to access to your system because this is how third parties are integrating. But within actually 5 minutes of work from customer side, suddenly they see what they couldn't see for years.
Wow.
And then we're giving recommendations and we're giving remediation steps, and the process is going usually. And it's like establishing trust and working with the customers to remediate those problems.
You know, Danny, I'm sure you agree, in the world of cybersecurity, right? The bad actors are, ahead of the game in many ways. And it's all of these things where the darkness is, where we don't see, where we don't know. That's where the juice is. That's where the rubber meets the road. And when you start blocking all the cool things that's sort of normal, what do? They go to those things that is, unusual, the things that you may not be monitoring. So as we get better in locking down endpoints and all these other things we're doing, the bad actors are looking for, those gaps, right? And it makes sense, obviously, that here's another thing that they are probably already exploiting. And you've got to be aware of it, of course. Sometimes it gets a bit tiring, Nanny. Oh my God, here's another thing we got to worry about. And then there's a supply chain, and then there's compliance, then there's always something, right? If you had to, I don't know, I just rate this, how much of a priority would you say companies should put on these NHIs?
I would say the top is priority, and maybe I'll just share with you a personal story on why I think so.
Yes.
So I think I shared it like I've been legal hacker, if you will, right? But was serving, and you mentioned in the military, so for many years. And when I started my career, it was all about vulnerabilities and exploitations and this kind of stuff, right? Like you had it all. I finished my career as an identity expert. The reasons for that is it became so hard to go after vulnerabilities and like classic security problems or like opportunities, if you will. But it became so easy in the world of like authentication just to log in, just to find some password somewhere that like someone just left in an open channel, right? Or like overused and like shared like not in an open channel, but like in channels that we can access to, or even buy it in like the black market, right? Like it's like it's something much easier. And actually, this is what attackers are doing today. There's like a quote that everyone uses, like they're not hacking, they're just logging in.
Lazy hackers, but yeah, I get the point. So you're seeing that these vulnerabilities are much easier to access, and therefore, why do I need to go and go crazy to rack my brains around going into very complex ways, getting to a system when I could just grab the credentials and boom, get in instantly.
Exactly. It's so easy. It's ridiculously easy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Sometimes it's It's mind numbing. When you think about how the simplest things are the most critically problematic things. Like your passwords, a little bit of two factor. There are things you can do to sort of improve your game, and I would consider these things simple, as opposed to, for example, not having your password 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. And I bet you there's probably some people still do that today.
Exactly.
And so there's some things you just can't protect humans from. So we're connected using these NHIs, and that's sort of like playing games with what we're doing, and it's keeping us more vulnerable. And so channel partners, MSPs, and so on, they need to kind of look at this as well. So how do you work with the channel? How is your go-to-market in helping them to help their customers solve this problem and maybe themselves too?
So let's break down the point that we've been discussing. On 90% of solving a problem is just, first of all, identifying it, right? And putting it like in a realm of understanding. So it's not only discovery, it's also putting it in other categories that people can understand, right? That we can explain to others, like, what is this risk? What is this gap, right? When you're speaking about third-party exposure, right? Like it's easy to understand. Like it's someone outside of my organization that has access. But at the end of the day, the access is managed by NHIs. So therefore, you understand that like once you are seeing that problem and you're attaching it to something that you know as a problem, right? Suddenly it's very easy to explain it. You're saying to the business, oh, we're onboarding like hundreds of third parties a month or 2 months or 3 months, doesn't matter, right? You know that out of those, 70%, let's say, we're not using any longer after that. And by the way, we don't have a process of cleaning up their access, and they're not obligated to us. And therefore is the problem that we have, right? So this is just like one example where I'm iterating this one and doubling down on that, because this is the process that we're usually doing with channels, with MSPs, or like with the customers themselves directly to explain the problem, right?
Yeah. It's definitely an educational process. I mean, they need to understand what they don't know. I mean, humans in general, if they don't know that thing is hot, they might touch it. That's how we learn as a kid, right? And in cyber, it just seems like there is so many different moving parts. It's sort of hard to kind of, picture it all. And then, of course, you have the challenge of humans in general being a little over fatigued in all the different things they have to do. So, these tools and solutions is certainly going to help them save the day, so to speak. So, Danny, you get the last word. What do you want the channel partners and those folks to know about Oasis Security and why they should make this a priority?
So first of all, the problem of NHIs is that NHI sits in between security and business continuity and innovation, right? Like everything that we're pushing towards within the organization involves NHIs, and actually NHIs are probably the most critical part of that, right? So it's really important to understand that this friction, if you will, it's not that we need to lean towards one direction or the other, like put security in place all in and then stop the business from moving forward, or the opposite. Let the business move forward and just like don't think about security. We need to think about Oasis as the connecting tissue between those two initiatives, right? Because we are addressing to the fundamental problem of non-human identities that are completely different than human identities, and they need a different fundamental address of understanding those accounts, discovering those that you don't even can see with use other tools, and contextualizing that, right? And by contextualization, I mean explaining for each account what are they used for, who is owning them, like what will be the impact of removing them, to build that picture, this like mapping of everything you have in the infrastructure, right? To the point that you can actually understand You can prioritize. You can explain it to developers like, why is it important for them to clean up this account, to rotate that, and
Mm.
actually drive the policy-driven decisions and remediation steps with Oasis towards the level of complete lifecycle management, as we call it. So make sure that those accounts are treated as human accounts from the moment they're born to the moment that we need to decommission them. Everything in the middle, according to the policies, is being done in collaboration between the teams.
Makes so much logical sense, Danny. I wonder why nobody's doing that already. But um, one more question, actually. Is this gonna, break the bank? How much money does this cost? Is it affordable?
It's affordable like any other security tool, sometimes even more affordable if we understand the impact of potential cost reduction and business velocity that we can gain with this great combination of security and business velocity.
Good. Well, I mean, these days, as you know, Danny, everybody's there's a lot of there's only so much budget available, and as you
Mhm.
add more and more and more layers to the technology stack, it's like, my goodness, another. So
Yeah,
consolidating, getting rid of a few things, doing the best to kind of like keep the budget more focused on the things that makes the most sense is sort of where I guess people are thinking, or the trend is moving. So hopefully your solution can help them to fix some of the problems and maybe adjust their budgeting as well. Danny, best way for them to reach your website. What is the website address?
Oasis.security. Very simple.
There you go. All right, Danny, it's been a pleasure. Keep us posted how things are coming along. And looks like you've got another opportunity for channel partners to help themselves and their customers. Cheers.
Thank you very much for having me and have a wonderful day.
You too.